Yes, welcome. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, it's not the return of the G, it's the return of the FARC and the CT. If you're not familiar with what CT is, Culturalist Theory is in the building, and I'm going to let my special guests introduce themselves. Who you be?
Hey man, what's up? It's your man CJ Williams. As you mentioned, Culturalist Theory. I appreciate the invite, bro. Glad to be here talking some OutKast. Culturalist Theory, man, it's a YouTube platform. We rank and do creative countdowns on artists from the 90s to now. Make sure y'all check it out, youtube.com/Culturalist Theory.
Yeah, and I feel like that is not a search that's hard to do for a lot of people. It's around that time. It's I like to call it OutKast season, man. We have hit the 25th anniversary of this classic album. Of course, like we always do on this channel, the question is, how classic is this classic? This is category 2, where we go over the rap performance on this album. We're going to be dissecting what actually was said on this particular piece of work. And with no further ado, we'll jump into it. If you have not already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Culturalist Theory too, so you can catch every countdown, put that notification bell on. And we're going to jump into it. The first dimension we talk about in category 2 is personality and charisma, dimension 1. What can we say about the level of personality and charisma on displayed on this album? And I always bring up how difficult a task it is. As a rapper, I can tell you it is not an easy job to let your personality convey through an audio piece of work. Videos are like the cheap medium. You get a little bit more out of it. Yep. But to be able to pull somebody in on a reel, yep, on a digital piece of work, or back then I guess it was analog, what can we say?
Yeah, that's tough to do, and not only pull them in but hold their attention over 15, 16, 17 tracks. So with that being said, it's a little bit of a cheat code because it's 2 people here, right? You got a little bit of a dynamic to work with, and then there's always going to be people who lean more toward one than the other. That's just kind of how it is when it comes to groups, but that's the plus, that's the pro to a group, because you get to reach a lot more people with that. With that being said, charisma, this album screams it. Like, bro, like 3K in this bag, Big Boy in this bag. Yeah, like you could argue back and forth about who got who on what, if you want to play that game. But the fact that it's even a debate to let you know they want high frequency, man, with this project. So yeah, that they got that. That's a check, or whatever you use to mark whether that has it or not. 100%.
Yeah, I think one thing and this might be revisionist nostalgia, man, because I feel like in the 90s we weren't so heavy on the who got who. We just had our favorite verses from songs. When I revisited this album, I was realizing the pro and con of it all, right? This is the album for a lot of people that brought attention to OutKast. The South been new. If you were a hip hop head, you've been new. We 3 albums in, but because this is the album where folks started paying attention, this is the first time you start hearing those conversations. And Big Boy has gone on record saying this is the album where the divergence became clear. You started seeing, oh, this is why it's titled Aquemini. This is why you need a Big Boy. This is why you need a Dre. Because I think about the viability of this in the 90s. This is 1998. This, if it was an Andre solo by itself, may not have been as appreciated without the groundedness that Big Boy brings, right? And then Big Boy by himself, I don't think they would have been as famous. He would have got his respect. I think he would have swam in a similar lane to maybe a Scarface.
Yeah.
And because they're both coming into their own. And so you appreciate it when you look back for what it is, them balancing each other out. And as we go into different dimensions, we'll talk about where the divergence shows itself the most, but I do think you needed that, because if Big Boy is the anchor that allows Dre to make a track like a synthesizer, yep. or lets them be experimental with a track like Liberation or Spody Outie without people scrunching their face up, because they break rules every album.
Absolutely. Every
album they break rules. But here you're really seeing that dexterity and flexibility with both of them. Both of them are stepping into, Dre got Big Boy to sing. He sang on this album,
Like even can you even say that OutKast has 2 albums that sound the same? Like, not even close. Like they all have their own identity, and there just happens to be an evolution with theirs in terms of where the sound was going, and to your point, the divergence would they eventually obviously put a double album where they're both on separate joints.
Right.
We came to that point, but I just think it's interesting that you pointed out the sounds. It's refreshing. It's unique to them, even though they're two different people. Everything from the title to the whole meaning behind all of this stuff just made sense. It just added up. Even at the time, it added up. Even though you're right, we weren't debating, so to speak, who got who. We were just plucking, like you said, favorite verses. But you saw it then. We just didn't really. It may not have sat in until a little bit later when we saw how things unfolded.
My other collaboration episode, shout out to Changing to the Hip Hop Guards. My guest Uncle E, he had pointed out how we really didn't get into these conversations about who killed who on each other's tracks until the Renegade and Ether era, where Nas said, Eminem killed you on your own track. From then on, I feel like all the conversations have always been like, it can't just be a feature. It's like, they got them. And then we just celebrated, or, a lot of the publications were just highlighting the history of Kendrick's verse on Control.
Yep.
And so that just really cemented that as forever how we look at features. But
facts.
Speaking of features, you said this album screams charisma and personality. Even the guests on here are so distinct, right? We talk about Cool Breeze. Cool Breeze has always been a rapper that just trips with just, hey, I am Atlanta streets.
Yep.
And I think, lines like he said, so I think after I finish this last sack, I'm gonna go on and get some of this back. It's just conversational. And we'll talk about more of that, but I mean that's something, because a lot of albums have forgettable features.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was about to say these supplemented, you know what I mean? It's just that kind of the sprinkles on top. Big Boy and Andre are enough to hold it down with their diverse production and all of that to make it unique enough where you can sit through 1 through 16 and still be ready to run it back afterward. But the well-placed features, and I'm a sucker for a well-placed feature, and that doesn't always have to be a 16. It might could be a bridge. It might could be background vocals. It might could just be the hook. It might get an interlude. Whatever the case, I'm here for that. And so they did it well. It's not a ton. It's not feature heavy, but they're well placed, which I'm always here for.
Yeah, absolutely. So on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, you ask about what metric we use. On a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, what are you giving this album for the personality and charisma displayed on it?
That's absolutely a 5.
Absolutely.
It's a 5, and that's probably gonna be a common number we hear with this album. I mean, it's just this body of work is crazy, but that's a 5 for sure.
Yeah. So that takes us right to Dimension 2. Dimension 2 is where we talk about the suspension of disbelief or the believability factor. So this is a two-parter. First, we ask the question, is this an album that's asking you to suspend your disbelief in the first place? For all intents and purposes, this does not seem like an album where they're like, oh, it's the character, where alter ego, and it seems like, no, this is OutKast. So much so that we're gonna use our real zodiac signs to pronounce our distinct differences and personalities. So I'd say it's not a suspension of disbelief album.
I agree
with that.
No, I definitely agree. And even with on certain songs, like if you listen to Return to the G, it's all about how I'm Big Boy and moving with this newfound success, with this newfound fame. People know me. I'm still moving a certain way because I have to in these Atlanta streets. There's a couple of storytelling joints that let you know they're doing storytelling at this time, and so you don't have to worry about anything out of the ordinary with that. I think it's labeled pretty well, and like you said, labeling it's almost similar to labeling your album like your government name or a self-titled album. It's similar to that. Then that lets you kind of know what time it is. And then also when artists when they go by their name, their government name, they usually let you know what type of vibe that they're on. So that's a good call out to the Aquemini title being about them and the differences in them. So it's definitely not a reach, in my opinion.
Man, what a great point. I think Dre is one of the first rappers to just use his name, because I think people forget he was not calling himself 3000 until the first time I heard Andre call himself 3000 was on a song with Mystical called Neck of the Woods, which wound up being on that Mystical album, which didn't come out till 2000. But he starts his verse off and he goes, Andre 3000, da 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 da. Never before. If you look at the ATLians liner notes, it says Andre Benjamin.
Yep.
So, yeah, what a great point. He's one of the early rappers who are like, I ain't got no alias. It's just what I am, right? So then the natural question is, how much do we believe OutKast on this album? How good of a job do they do at making us believe them?
I think it's a strong job because they're not saying anything out of their ordinary. There's no, in my opinion, there's no stretches of the imagination from thinking back. And I thought it was authentic. This isn't even hindsight. I thought it was authentic the day I bought this. You know what I mean? Like I bought this the day it dropped, when got the CD. I think I was a freshman in high school, junior. I don't know. I was in high school. I remember buying this and I bought it from day one. And then plus you kind of know their story at this point, depending on how long you've been following them. So I know that's independent of this particular album, but I think they do a good job of making it believable in my opinion.
Yeah, I think to the points you've already raised, there's sprinkles of their real life all in between there. You hear a track like Spody Odie, and as much as they are talking, they go in and out of talking as observer and as person in this, right? Dre said that the first half of his spoken word portion is him speaking on a real event where he's trying to go into the club, but he was too drunk, he couldn't even make it to the door. Then the whole part about the fight breaking out is hypothetical, but this could happen, like he said, via anywhere USA or any ghetto USA. And then Big Boy, it almost sounds like he's talking about how he met his baby's mother, but then he flips it as his what he calls smoking word portion goes into just speaking in general the situations that young dudes in the hood find themselves in if they don't make the right choices, right? So I'm like, oh, that was genius. How first you think he's just talking about his autobiographical, when I first met my Spody Odie Dopalicious angel, you know?
Yep.
So you get that all throughout, and I don't think they miss a step in creating any semblance of doubt. Like, they ain't doing it. And they poke fun at it, right? The skit right before Rosa Parks is like, first some niggas was some aliens, then they were some genies, after they were some pimps. So they're very aware.
Yeah, and that's important, man. You got to be, as an artist, being self-aware is a slept-on characteristic that I think a lot of people, some people have mastered, and it's done well for them. You can count OutKast as one of those types of artists.
Yeah, I love it. It's something the best rappers address in silence the haters. And Jay-Z does it every next album.
Yep.
There's a rumor that he was with Free. Next album, he's like, I ain't have a baby by Free. You know, like,
he got a bar for it, bro. Yep.
Eminem's gonna do it. If there's rumor he's racist, he's gonna address it on his next album. Yep. So I love this album begins. And you don't hear Dre really do this again with this aggressiveness. Dre might do it more casual. Like when you hear Mighty O, he's like, yeah, y'all want me to come back, but I'm bored. On this, he's like, listen, what's up with Dre? Is he in the code? Is he on drugs? Is he gay? When y'all gonna break up? When y'all gonna wake up? Like,
yeah, he knocked it all out early on the album. Yep.
On that note, what we giving OutKast for believability on a scale from 1 to 5 on this album?
I'm going 5, man. 5.0.
5.0. All right, that takes us to dimension 3. This is where we start getting into the nitty gritty of technicality, the delivery and use of voice. So this is all about vocal tones and projection and the approach on the microphone, right? So I think where maybe, again, true OutKast fans started, or they might have known from the beginning. I think this is where a finely tuned Southern ear comes into play. That's the advantage of having a Southern ear. Some people are like, I always could tell them apart. On the first album, I think they sounded more homogenous on their first album. ATLians, you start to see the difference. And here, if you never could tell them apart, you can definitely tell them apart. The accent, you can't get over the accent.
Come on, yeah. There's that.
Everything they do, whether they're singing or rapping, that Georgia accent is in the mix to remind you where they're from.
Absolutely. And it doesn't distract. I think it adds to it. And voice, I forgot, I think Jay might have said voice was like one of the most important attributes. He might have said it's the most that lets people stand out as a rapper. And voice can be used as an instrument, man. So the accent 100% adds to that, for sure.
Yeah, understanding how to use it is really the defining feature of what makes you an artist. Dre does a zillion things with his voice on this album, This is the beginning of the free Dre that we've come to know, that iteration of him. I was thoroughly pleased to read that there's in the making of this, Dre says Big Boy pulled him to the side when he was doing synthesizer. He said, "Hey man, I just want to let you know, streets don't like when you do your voice like that." I'm like, yeah. When I think about the influence, I think about the Kendrick Lamar.
Bingo.
Every time he does that weird robotic voice thing that I want to say was pioneered by Dre on this album, I'm like, man, this song would have been so cool if you just would have resisted the urge to do that. And I feel like Kendrick has grown out of that a little bit more, but boy.
Yeah, that was the first artist that came to mind. As soon as you said that, like, "Don't Kill My Vibe" is Andre all over again, and not in a biting way, like not even on a it's really just like you can tell he was influenced by it. He put his own spin on it and it fits him, but it's 100% influenced by Andre and probably this album specifically. Or
if we want to be real spooky, maybe it's just that Gemini connection, right? But you'll hear Dre do that. You'll hear him do a lot more animated ad-libs that you've never heard him do. I'm thinking about before he comes on with his verse on Y'all Scared, he's doing a whole bunch of like and ad-libs behind Gibbs' verse. He's like, no, they don't want to hear that. They be talking that,
Yeah, that's my shit too.
Yeah, I mean, besides the obvious where he's singing, right? He's singing on Liberation. He's singing on Synthesizer. In his approaches to his verses, there's calmer tones. You take Aquemini, which might be the calmest tone that Dre uses, and then there's more aggressive, like Chunky Fire, where he's belting his verses out. With Big Boy, similar. You're not gonna see as much of a range, but you do see him playing with speed. I feel like there's different speeds that he touches on. If he's not gonna have different levels of boisterousness, there are different levels of pacing.
Absolutely. I agree. Andre has more range as an artist. He just do a little bit more, which is perfectly fine. But I do think they did enough to differentiate themselves. And I could tell the difference day one between the two. Yeah, I've never had that issue. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it AT-aliens for me because I had to acclimate. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so, but they'll tell you in the beginning that's a track that they recorded for some playlist.
Exactly.
So you hear the youthfulness in Big Boy. It was almost maybe the last album they could have slipped a song if they wanted to.
Agreed.
Slip a lost tapes type track on. It blended so well. You know, sometimes people might throw an old song and you're like, oh, this stands out. It did stand out. It was groovy. His voice right before it really, really changed because Big Boy has now a uncle quality to his voice.
Mm-hmm.
Where before it was more like I gotta get that.
That youthful kind of playfulness in it.
Yeah, more of a bounce to it. Now this is more like choppy. This is the beginning of Big Boy getting into his choppiness. But all throughout, and we talk about vocal tones. That also comes into play with how you're choosing your guests, how you play off each other. I think of a track like Slump, Big Boy is the calm one on there. He gets to play the seasoned, mature one because Cool Breeze is always a little hype when he's on the track. Backbone is somewhere in the middle. There's our introduction to Backbone. All the tones blend in this harmonious cacophony on Liberation. It's like everybody came where they needed to come on that track. Pause.
Good one.
What you giving us for delivery?
Man, I would say just mix it up a little bit. I'll go 4.5. Because one is they're both not equally yoked when it comes to that. So I'll say 4.5. Just to balance it out a little bit.
Which again is another 90s question. Could we have handled both of them wanting to jump deep into the experimental bag?
No.
Like we needed Big Boy to be the grounded, bring us back.
Yep.
And all it, the guests are pretty unorthodox themselves. There's nobody. Backbone is probably the most straightforward rap guest on here. Everybody's got some real distinct deliveries.
And they got them on display. Yeah.
That takes us to Dimension 4. everyone's favorite, the flow. It's one thing OutKast has always had and always going to be known for is the flows that they introduced to the game. Now, the first album, they go on record saying they were trying to copy like Cells of Mischief and the popular wordy style that was out at the time, but you saw them grow into their own. Even on that album, they were introducing back and forth and flows that were different for the game, coming from a southern accent, right? This is one of those examples of if Big Boy was a soloist, this is where he's finally coming into his own with flow. It would probably be noticed how much he stepped it up for flow on this album. But because Dre also stepped it up, if Big Boy stepped it up by 2, Dre takes it by 10.
Yep. Because
just like you asked me, are there any OutKast albums that we could say sound the same? I don't know if Dre does the same flow on this album twice.
Bro.
Every song's approached differently.
Yeah, I agree, and that, like you said, that speaks to, first of all, that speaks to his greatness, which is why he's revered so highly without having a true solo rap album. But people still have him. Some people got him on the Mount Rushmore, top 10, top whatever the case. But that's the reason. That's because that's how nice he is. Just to put it simply, you know what I mean. So he's different. You know what I mean? He's been different for a long time.
The biggest microcosm of this is Return of the G. Big Boy, again, if that was Big Boy's song, he'd be praised for how many switch-ups he had in that, right? So he goes, but still willing to grind, stand in my grind, never back down, willing to rob, steal, and kill anything that threatens mine. And then he switches the flow up again right after that. We talk about that staccato thing, right? But good luck couldn't be caught, see? Having fights had to be fought for it. And then he breaks it down. The first nigga that buck gonna be the first nigga we attack. But coming after the verse where Dre is just tap dancing all over with the sped up flow and the repetitive refrain, right? You get down.
Yep.
That's what I mean. That's your microcosm for the whole album. It's like, man, what Big Boy is doing is like gold medal. Yep. But then Andre introduces you to the idea that there's a platinum medal that exists, and it's like, oh.
Yep. And but they feed off of that too, man. Like it's Return of the G is a perfect example of that. I'm glad you pointed that out. Just the level of technical ability that they're both, putting on a show. Man, that's one of my favorite songs on there, easily.
Yeah, it's when I heard that I was hooked. You said you bought it on CD. I was still buying tapes. I bought tapes until the year 2000. So as soon as that comes on, even from Dre's talking, right? And you're like, man, these guys got a sense of humor while being dead serious. You can hear Dre not smiling as he says, every time I try to get a piece of mine, niggas try to get a piece of mine.
Yep.
So I gotta grab my piece. I remember playing that in the car for my dad, and my dad laughed at that line because it's funny, but he's dead serious. And then he goes in, right? Just veering close enough to almost be offbeat. It's more like E40, where E40 always has control of how jumbled he's gonna make his rush line sound. And I thought that was masterful in itself, because I'm like, I know Dre is doing this on purpose. He's careening to see how close he can come until he crashes, to match the aggressiveness of how he wants to present it and deliver it, to let you know he's so serious about these points. Let's talk about time traveling, rhyme jabbing, something mind unraveling, get down. And every time he says get down, he gets, more forceful with it. Get down.
Yep.
And so you won't hear a flow like that again. Chunky Fire doesn't sound like anything else.
No,
the natural cadence that he goes into on All the Storyteller, where he's like, well, it was more like spending the night, 3 a.m, like that pattern. If you needed one verse to capture why Dre is a flow master on this, it's Rosa Parks' verse.
Yeah. Yep. I can't argue that.
When he goes into that, that's one to live by. Either that's one to die to. I try to just throw it at you, determine your own adventure, and pauses to say his name.
Yeah.
And it switches into a whole nother wordy pattern, multi-syllables.
Yep. Without losing you, though. Without losing you. He does that without losing you. And it's easy to get spiritual, lyrical, miracle and go over some people's heads or experiment with the flows and lose people, and people can't catch but he does it in a way that you can still keep up. You know what I mean? Even to the casual listener, they may not be able to break it down with the same ear as you're able to break it down, but they can follow along though. They don't get lost, so to speak, and that's a skill in itself.
That's the art, man. I can't quite put my finger on how it is that Dre's able to do that, but he does it all throughout this album. You understand every verse, even if you can't easily quote it, and you got to go back and read it. That's a different conversation. But a flow that's easy to follow while still being intricate.
There you go.
You know, we're talking multi-syllables and consonant sounds that sound pleasing next to each other.
Yep.
Wow, you're carefully selecting words, and I almost wish, it could be argued this is peak Andre, because I think as Andre got further away from rap, when he comes back to it, reminds me of another Gemini, Lauryn Hill. He's not as concise or tightly packed. And Dre Pope, he's aware of it. That whole song 16, where he's talking about how the 16 is not enough. He talks about how he gets lost in his verse. And I hear so many features that he's been on in the past where he will go on a tangent, and it's like, Dre, why did you go there? He's like, think about the Walk It Out remix where he starts talking about cars, and he's like, if you're into cars before they stopped the mechanical production and started making everything plastic. But anyway,
that's him not rapping though. That's him taking breaks and having a lot to get off his chest, and so that's funny that it translates into the bars and to the run-on thoughts, and that's funny.
It's a lot to run-on thoughts. I think about his guest verse on "I Do" by Jesus. It's just he gets lost in it now. Here, every point he wants to make is made, and we'll talk about that more in the next dimension. But as far as flows, I want to give Big Boy some more light, like "Skew It on the Barbie." "Skew It on the Barbie," one of the standout flow switch ups for him. He's skating on that track. Skating.
Easily, man, and that's one of those ones that was a single, if I remember correctly. But that's another one that just makes them so different, and it was so different from what they had previously put out. And it kind of made you. I feel like it opened people's minds on what they could listen to and what rap could sound like back then. And in a time where so many people want to be content and so many people want to be comfortable in one sound. I love that they were able to push the boundaries of not even just the production, but like the flows, like you said, and him just gliding over that with ease. He made it sound easy.
He really did. I feel like they made Raekwon step it up a little bit flow-wise there. Because when I listen back to it, I'm like, okay, Raekwon was doing a flow we hadn't heard him do. But skating, when there's parts of Big Boy's verse that I can't recite back. If somebody was doing karaoke, when he says that, I think it's time to bungee, but buddy, we will be back. Or
that's
tough. One indicator, we got my bag. We gonna keep on jabbing this, stabbing off in the track. I think it's time to bungee, but buddy, we will be back. Say that fast. I think it's time to bungee, but buddy, we will. It's the "we will be back." That is not easy to spit,
right?
And that's what I mean. It's like these moments are what brought so much attention to OutKast, but I hate that this also started the conversation of who's better, because they both stepped it up.
Absolutely, and I love that you pointed that out. That this is the era when you did a feature on somebody else's record, you adapted to their style. Biggie did it on Bone. You know what I mean? Like that's countless. There's countless examples. But that's some people complain about that today. The flows is kind of similar across regions and across artists, whereas back then people had distinct flows, and they only experimented when they jumped on somebody else's record, and that's a prime example of it.
That is. All right, well, we giving flow on a scale from 1 to 5.
Oh, 5, easy.
5, easy. So far, we've been lots of 5s. We got 1 4.5 in the mix. We're gonna jump into Dimension 5. Speaking of 5s, the wordplay and bar intent. This is around the time where I started seeing magazines place Dre on the list. They weren't, it's been talked about over the decades how most magazines at the time had what they call an East Coast bias or Northeast bias. I always get tripped out when people say East Coast. I'm like, Atlanta is East Coast. But Northeast bias, right? So Dre would pop up on the list. He'd be like number 30. And I'd be like, me, hip hop fan, I'm like, nah, Dre should be way higher. Dre was like one of my absolute faves from the beginning. But I was wondering where Big Boy was, why they weren't putting Big Boy on there. Because up until this album, you could argue that they were on similar pace. And, you know, until CeeLo came out and snitched and told the world that Dre was writing some of those verses for Big Boy on the first two albums. I almost wish they never said that, man. That messed up my head a little bit. Because now I'm always listening like, which part do I think Dre wrote? Because they're never going to tell you.
Right. I mean, but that's not too far fetched when you've got two people in the studio collaborating. Like, now, I guess it depends on the level of which they're writing. Like, is he handing over a full notepad with rhymes, or is he pointing him in a certain direction? That happens a lot when people collab. I feel like, I could be wrong, because the Locks say that when Jada and Styles are going back and forth. Yeah, they're not in separate studio. Like, you gotta, they throw each other bars. They know they can rap on their own.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's closer to what you say, because we listen to a track like West Savannah, and you want to believe that's all Big Boy. It's talking about his hometown. It's talking about things that matter to him, and he's saying things that you only hear Big Boy say, right? You listen to that booty shake music in your trunk, as long as it's that tick tick followed by that bump. But yeah, when you take that into consideration, and there are moments on this album where you see why they are a duo. You see why they exist together, because Big Boy sometimes has the best verse, and then there are a lot of songs where they're evenly matched. But then it's, for all of those songs, there's about 5 on here where Dre goes into the stratosphere. And I think this is where all the attention went. And that's why you started seeing Dre, because unfortunately, those outlets with the Northeast bias, this was the album where they got acquainted with OutKast. And so now they're paying attention like a new jack, like a newbie. What is this new thing? Had you been on the ride since the first album, you would have known and appreciated it more. But now it's all Dre, because Dre is giving you verses like Return to the G. The problem where this gets validated, this slant towards Dre gets validated, is on those 5 or so tracks where Dre's just, so a song like Rosa Parks and a song like Synthesizer. Big Boy's doing it to himself. He's not helping his causes, because he's giving you phoned in verses that are interchangeable. They could have went anywhere.
For sure.
So I was especially mad at Big Boy on Synthesizer, because I was like, where are you, bro? Did you not get them? Did you lay this verse down first and then they did the song around you? Or you're not keeping on the topic? And then Art of Storytelling, part 1. That's another one where I feel like maybe he did his verse first and then they decided where they're going, because part 2, they're on the same page.
Absolutely.
They're going in the same direction, and they're equally yoked. Art of Storytelling, I'm like, man, this could have been any Big Boy verse. All you're talking about is getting with. It almost seemed like Dre felt like he needed to save that by saying Susie Screw at the beginning of his verse to blend it together and make it more of a song. So you get the feeling that this is the art of storytelling, because leave it up to that first verse is just, okay, I splashed in the back seat. I splashed in the parking lot.
That's a good catch, actually. And now you're gonna make me listen to that with a different set of ears, because I didn't think about that right there. That it things that may have been built around a verse, and then the next thing you know, that's kind of outdated to the subject matter, and Dre may have to come in and save the day and tweak his a little bit so that it does seem more like a full beginning, middle, and end story. That's a good point, or at least a connection. And I could be reaching, but in history, when I think about the reviews at the time, when this album got 5 mics and what they were talking about as standouts, it's gonna be what Dre did on Synthesizer, what he did on that Art of Storytelling Part 1, and what he did on Rosa Parks and Aquemini, the title track. That whole, you're saying stuff like, them poor babies walking slowly to the candy lady. It's looking shaky, needs some hope, like the words maybe, if, or probably, right? And then Big Boy's about, go get pay your beeper bill. And I guess that's what makes them, because that's a memorable line. Like, people recite that line, but it's not as technical as what Dre was doing. But you see that a lot with groups. You see that with Bun B and Pimp C. Like Bun B on a technical level is better at rapping than Pimp C, but Pimp C has the sauce and the memorable swag that you recite some of his stuff maybe a little bit more. So it makes it a good balance.
I think that's a dynamic that's missing here, because Big Boy and Dre are celebrated for the same things. It's not like this complementary in yin and yang way. It's more, no, it is yin and yang, but with UGK, we can argue Pimp is the producer, and like you said, Pimp is the more dynamic personality. He's known to make the more brazen comments, right? Take that shiny shit off, you embarrassing us, right?
Yeah.
Bun is not gonna say it like that.
Nah.
But with Cast, you can't say one is the producer. They both produce.
That's a good point.
They both make the hooks. They both can fit. I'm specifically speaking to those songs, those instances where Dre is saying this really witty, thought-provoking stuff, and Big Boy is just talking that Cadillac stuff.
Yeah.
Where it called for something more. Aquemini, synthesizer, and art of storytelling called for a little bit more. The song is called The Art of Storytelling.
Yeah.
Now, you and I as OutKast fans, I don't think that put a dent in it for us. But journalists and outlets who are just getting on the OutKast wave, they're running with that. Oh, this one's way better.
Yeah. Now that makes sense. And then even like you said, some of the publications didn't really catch on to this album till later. I saw Rolling Stone had it like 500 on their 500 greatest albums, like way back when, and then they amended it a couple of years ago, and now it's like top 40. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
right. Yeah, like, Rolling Stone loves putting themselves putting their foot in their mouth.
Oh yeah, we know how they get down.
I guess that's how they keep the register ringing too. You know, magazine is a dying art, so let's make these top 50 lists every 3 months and get people mad on the internet, right?
Yep, with these clicks.
Yeah, clickbait.
Yep.
And so on the flip side of that, I think of all the tracks where Big Boy is matched or where he may outshine. And I try to keep my personal opinion out of it, but as much as possible, right? Trying to keep this objective. But personally, I think Big Boy might have the better verses on Chunky Fire, Skewered on the Barbie, and is it Y'all Scared? One of those.
Yeah, I do think he had the better verse on Y'all Scared though. February 1st, 1970 for my birthday. Yeah, he snapped on that.
Yeah, because my heart don't pump no slushy, which is a callback to what he said on oh no, I think Dre said it. My heart don't pump no Kool-Aid, jumping you get too sprayed. So yeah, when he's like, my heart don't pump no slushy, you touch my niggas, you touch me. I blow up the microphone like Marilyn Manson, you can't hush me, right?
Yeah. He snapped. I thought he got Andre on that. But then I thought Cujo got hair. I love Cujo verse. I love how he closed it. But yeah,
on a written reading a verse as prose, or just reading it as a piece of literary work, Cujo is saying some of the most incendiary and thought-provoking things on that. It's always an acquired taste, Cujo's flow or lack thereof. Goody Mob's always been an interesting group to me because none of them really excel in anything specifically. It's how they all sound together. I think vocal tone, that's a crash course in putting good tones together. They're all so different. But I don't know if you want to hear solo from anybody but CeeLo.
I was just about to say CeeLo is the one, but agreed, they blend well together, and they're a group for a reason, and a successful group for a reason. Where the solos Big Gip tried, moderate success.
Cujo rarely rhymes. Actually, this is one of the few verses where his bars are lining up rhyme wise. Because I mean, Cujo is he rhymes less than Big Rube does, and Big Rube is coming with poetry. So Cujo be like, I'm just gonna speak what I feel.
Yeah, and you hear it though.
And you definitely hear it. Yeah, so those are the 3 tracks where I think Big Boy maybe outshines. I think about what he did on Chunky Fire. He was in his bag on that one. I'm like, yeah, Big Boy, close this album out right. Let him know that you See, if I do what you won't do today, boy, will I live tomorrow like you can't even live because you strayed, motivational skills lacking. When I see a nigga you packing, understand though, you behind a 75,000 car though, still stay with mom though, playing the king like Don though, you choked up. You was the nigga supposed to be so loped up, making them think hip hop is dead. Exhume the body if you ain't scared. And if I see you in the streets, I dap you down like you was Greg. Yeah. Right? The wordplay is in there. He's talking about if hip hop is dead, if y'all making them think hip hop is dead, exhume the body if you ain't scared. Bring it back to life then.
Yep.
And speaking to that whole verse, because that whole verse is about make better decisions, step it up. Y'all need to be doing better. It's a do better verse, right? And then he plays off the Greg Street name, and I'm like, and he plays off the Don King name too. He's like, he's playing like you the king like Don though. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, he's snapping.
and people overlook that because you got Dre saying things like, I met a gypsy and she hit me to some life game to stimulate and activate the left and right brain.
Yeah.
Which we learned later is I guess this is a reference to Erykah Badu, right?
That sounds about right.
But
we know how that swag changed up after that. He started rocking overalls and wigs.
Oh yeah, he was full out now. This is where the furry boots.
Oh yeah.
Let's dissect that Rosa Parks verse from Dre, right? He said, baby boy, you're only funky as your last cut. You focus on the past, that has to be a has what. That's one to live by, or either that's one to die to. Dre always speaks in terms of choices. That might be that Gemini duality, right? He's like, oh, you can do this, you can do that. I'm just telling you how it is. And so he's like, yeah, that's one to live by, or either that's one to die to. Your career could end. I try to just throw it at you. Determine your own adventure. Andre. Got to the station, here's my destination. She got off the bus, the conversation lingered in my head for hours. Took a shower, kind of sour, cause my favorite group ain't coming with it. But I'm with you, cause you're probably going through it anyway. But anyhow, went in doubt, went on out and bought it, cause I thought it would be jamming. And these are the days when you can't stream ahead. Like,
right,
you gotta buy it and buyer beware, right?
And hope. That's all you gotta do.
But examine on the floor skit, wall skit, awfully sad, and that's costly. But that's all she wrote. And I hope I never have to float in that boat up Schitt's Creek. It's weak. And we know Dre, for somebody who comes on the mic and tells you he doesn't care what society is saying or what the people say. And you can tell, because I think about this verse on Sorry by T.I. where he's like, I'm giving my life in these verses, and all you can say on the internet is it's boring. It's boring.
He snapped on that too. No, I think that's one reason, probably one of many, why we haven't gotten a solo album from him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think he's seen the reception that Big Boy albums get, which are heralded as much as we would probably want them to be. Yeah. And I feel like if Dre came out with something and it was looked at in that light, it would hurt the legacy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he said, I think he said it in one of his interviews with Rick Rubin a few years ago. Besides just not being inspired,
right?
To hear a lot of Geminis say, he's nervous.
Yep.
He's a perfectionist and he's nervous. So, when he says, "It's weak" is the last quote that I want to hear when I'm going down. When all said and done, and they got a new Joe it down. When the record player get to skipping and slowing down, all y'all can say is them niggas earn their crown. But until then, like, it's that level of word connectivity. You pointed it out in the last dimension. Everything makes sense.
Yep.
Follow that. Me and my cousin from the Bronx, he was bringing that verse to my attention because I didn't appreciate it as much when I was younger until he broke down. I'm like, oh wow, that was all the conversation with the gypsy. And after she got off the bus, he's thinking about it as he goes and plays this tape from this group that he likes that disappointed him, hoping that him and his group don't disappoint fans in the future. Like, well, come on, man.
Right. On the single too. This is a radio joint.
On the single with a digestible flow that's still a traditionally hip-hoppy flow.
Yep.
Like, oh, it's a rapidy rap flow. Yep. Another memorable verse, of course, Aquemini, When They Come Back. I'll give both of them credit because I feel like Big Boy stepped it up on his comeback verse. You know, it's Big Boy, Daddy Fat Sacks, the nigga like them Cadillacs. I stay down for these streets because these streets is where my folks at. I like when he says, we missed a lot of church, so this music is our confession. Right?
especially how he said church, though. That shit was hard.
But then Dre comes back with that whole sequence where he's keeping the same flow. And something else I didn't realize when I was younger, the whole verse begins and ends on the same note. He's saying, meet the twin, Andre Ben. And at the end, the very last line is happening again. Andre, this is Andre. Y'all are just going to have to make amends. And I was like, oh. When I was younger, I thought he was just repeating his line. Like, Andre, this is Andre. I'm like, oh, you're like, meet the twin, Andre Ben.
That's hard. Like, that's hard.
The wordplay is there all throughout. The descriptiveness and imagery on Art of Storytelling Part 2. Blue lightning in the sky. And I thought I saw 4 horses. The big boy says, yeah, I thought I saw 4 horses while I'm driving to the dungeon.
You prefer Part 2 or Part 1?
Part 2. All the way.
Same. Yeah.
All the way. I love the beat on Art of Storytelling Part 1, but again, it felt more like a moment, an event, a song. They were on the same page for Part 2, and I didn't hear anybody doing end of the world songs. We'll talk about that in the next dimension. But anything else you can think of for wordplay?
Nah, man. I think we covered it, man. There's so much on here though, which makes it that much more of a dope piece of work. And you know what? I think that this coming out and when it did in the late 90s, where people had more time to sit with projects, you could argue now there's new albums every Friday, there's new singles every Friday, there's new videos, there's content, there's HBO Max, there's all these other things pulling at your attention. Back then, you bought the CD, $13.99 where I was from, $15.01 after tax, and you, just like he said in the verse, you wanted to make sure that there was you pulling something on here that you liked. Fortunately, this album was complete flames from front to back, but you were able to sit and digest it, and you had those times to kind of really, break things down, like, and take your time with it, because you didn't have so many distractions. So it's and then plus, I mean, I was a lot younger. I'm in high school. I ain't got to work and do all this extra stuff.
Oh,
so, yeah. I mean, you didn't have to worry about really life like that. You can live a little bit more carefree. So I had time to sit and listen to this, and so there's so much on here. So many gymnastics, man. It's just. Yeah,
this was the back to school album. So everybody's settling in first month or so back in classes. This is what we talked about in the cafeteria, especially because they got 5 mics in the source.
Yep.
And one of the first Southern rap albums to do that. And for me, it was like, finally, y'all see what I've been telling y'all. But also, it was like, man, I'm so glad I've been a fan, and that they delivered this way. So yeah, I'd say that I will speak on the one standout verse, Dre's verse on Mamacita. He had, in talking about this album, he had admitted that his verse was based on a relationship that he was in with a woman that was either bisexual or going lesbian, and he said he was affected by that. That's why that was what his verse was about. Because I always, even as a kid listening to it, I'm like, this sounds personal.
Yeah.
it was like, okay, she's mad because her girlfriend tried it. Was she choke slander against the wall? Like,
yeah, all over the place.
Yeah. I'm like, where is this coming from? Nobody was on the same page on that song.
That's my least favorite song.
It's everybody's least favorite. Yeah. It really is the Achilles heel. But I'm so glad he admitted that. Whenever Dre gives slices of his personal life, it's really interesting. All right, so on a scale from 1 to 5 for wordplay, you got to consider both Big Boy and Dre. So everything we've talked about, the songs where they evenly match, the songs where Big Boy kind of outshines, and the songs where Dre skyrockets and outshines.
Man, all things considered, I'll say 4.5 because in my opinion, it's still top tier. We really got to dig to look at the 2 or 3 times where it's kind of like, but overall, and then it's 2 of them, and some of them have multiple verses on the same song. They gave a lot for us to chew on, so yeah, I'd say 4.5.
All right, dimension 6. This is the overall quotability. I usually break this down into either punchlines or poetic wisdom, because most rappers usually give you one or the other. You are like a mutant if you're able to do both. It's like the holy grail when you're a rapper that's able to do both. And we get those. Those are usually our greats. On this album, I think you're going to find more of poetic wisdom than punchlines. I'm trying to think. Can you think of any punchlines on here?
Off the dome, not really. That's what I was just about to say. I would lean poetic wisdom as kind of the tone of this project. and again, kind of more just like the technical skill and the wordplay and the word flips. I think that's more this. There's not a lot of so and so like, so and so as, not a lot of metaphors. So yeah, I think it leans the other way.
Yeah, you're probably gonna get the most simile talk from Big Boy, and when he does it, it's not in this pronounced way where it's like, "Ooh, listen to my punchline." He's just doing comparative rap, right? Like crack, like Plumber's ass and Summer's grass, or I blow up the microphone like Marilyn Manson. There's a lot of that,
right?
But like you said, it's more word flip than let me set this up so you catch this, and here's the punchline. Nah.
Yep, yeah.
Poetic wisdom is. And I always credit Southern rappers because I think being in the South, you're privy to a lot more of these like conventional wisdom quotes. They just go say things like "God don't make no mistakes," like it's just Southern sayings.
Yeah, that they got from the older generation that you can tell but you can tell who raised them. Like Killer Mike says stuff like that, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I know what you mean. That's funny.
Yeah, but because of Dre's profundity on his album, again, this is where you're probably going to hear the most quotables because these lines have gone down in history as being what people signify this album by. So things like, question, is every nigga with dreads for the cause? Yeah. Is every nigga with golds for the falls? No, so don't get caught up in appearance.
Yep.
My personal favorite quotable from that same track is where he says, sin all depends on what you believe in. Faith is what you make it. That's the hardest shit since MC Ren.
Yeah. Whoa. Hard, bro. Man, that's hard.
Yeah.
Nah, they spit, man.
People remember lines like where he's talking about Sasha Thumper. I said, what you want to be? She said, alive. It made me think for a minute, then looked in her eyes. Mm-hmm. He said that came from a real thing. Messing around with Erykah Badu. He said he heard that from a little girl. So
okay.
Put that into song. But those moments are the quotables. What do you hear people quoting from this album?
Man, it's funny because you alluded to this earlier and it didn't make a ton of sense in the song. With pay beeper bill, like it may not even apply to necessarily what he was trying to say or the song in total, but that was a running thing ever since he said it. Whenever somebody is, prioritizing one thing over the other, we always used to kind of say, or got their priorities out of order or something. We would always kind of use that as a joke. But that's what made that so funny about the song, about it may or may not even fitting or making sense in that totality of that joint. But we always used to say that shit. That's one of my favorite. Just as that's something that's like a Twitter thing you would probably do if Twitter existed back in the day, or like a caption, an IG caption. People would be like, whatever. Yeah. But back in the day, that's what we used to run with.
Yeah, man. I think the stuff they do in between the actual verses is just as memorable. Because they are presences on this microphone. I think the way Big Boy ends his verse on Return of the Gangster, he's like, so quit spreading the rumors. We ain't Club Nouveau. or even Dre coming on and being like, niggas get jacked like Daniel.
Yep. Nah, it's a lot, man. Even on Spodioti, man, that was memorable lines on there too that a lot of people, that we would randomly say out of nowhere. So it's definitely, it's got a couple on here for sure.
Yeah. This is the first instance, I've said this before when we were talking about trap music, T.I.'s album. This is the first time I heard the word trap.
Yep.
Big Boy's verse on Spodioti, where he's like, now you just in the trap. Just that. Trap. Go on and marinate about that. Or he said, but legislation got this policy, 3 strikes and you ruined, now where your crew with? Like, just food for thought moments that are conventional. It's not this clever. You ain't got to rewind it to really catch it. It's like, Erykah Badu's verse alone is a quotable. Yep. Even the Peaches Enjoy to shake that load off. I hear people quoting that. Yep. Lots of things. On J. Cole's first unofficial single, Who Dat, he uses the last line of Dre's verse on Spodioti Dope Delicious, where he's like, now who else want to fuck with Hollywood Code?
Yep. That's one of those ones you get randomly out the blue as well, and people know exactly where that came from.
All right, so what you giving this for quotability? I guess we said we're leaning more towards poetic wisdom on a scale from 1 to 5.
Man, I would say 4, a strong 4 though. Just with the ones that we name, and a lot of things, like we said, on a technical level, a lot of stuff may be a little bit more difficult to recite just because of the wordplay nature of it. But then they sprinkled enough in there, even with some of the bars, but then even some of the skits, like you said, even Big Boy talking to everybody, or excuse me, on Return to G, everybody want a piece of mind, so I got to get a piece of mind. Like, even parts like that are memorable and recitable. So I would say 4.
Cool. Man, this is one of the smoothest episodes I've done, man. Like, we here, we get it. That's why I sought y'all, man. Dimension 7, the concepts. Every good classic album has something conceptual that takes rapping to a different level because it's forcing you, the listener, to listen more attentively. Whether it be they're just taking something from a different angle. It's not a concept album. I think, we established that because there's no suspended disbelief and they're not really packaging it up in this one thing. They're going all over the place.
Right.
The underlying theme is we're sticking together no matter how different we are. So it's not a concept album, but is there a conceptual song on here?
I mean, well, yeah, if you look at the art of storytelling, I mean, the world ending of part 2 specifically, that's the closest thing to it. Having a part 1, having a part 2, having them back to back, not splitting them up on different albums and, all of that stuff. And then, of course, I think they ended up doing part 3, on Drama's album, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Reminded me of that.
So they continued it on there, so that's the closest thing to it on this album.
Yeah, I think as far as a blatant concept, because every now and then you get loose concepts. Y'all Scared is loosely conceptual, right? And Goody Mobs, they're more famous for their like conspiracy theory or paranoia type tracks, and so they bring more Goody Mob spirit to this OutKast album than OutKast. For sure. It's definitely a more Goody Mob feeling song. Agreed. And in each of their verses, they are talking about some level of fear. That's one of those loose concepts where it's not in your face. Here's this blatant, we're all doing this way. But, you think about Dre talking about the war on drugs, and that's what his whole verse is surrounding. Mm-hmm. And Big Boy is talking about literal fear. I don't know what Timo's talking about. I think he's talking about competition. I think Gibb is talking about being fearless, and Cujo's just taking it on like a state of black folk. You too scared to get off the beat. That's how he ends his verse. Move, oink, oink, get foul.
Yeah, he took it to another level.
Yeah, so
I felt that verse.
Synthesizer would have been a wholly conceptual song if both of them were on the same page. But if a lot of people just like to ignore Big Boy's verse and they just always talk about how that song was before its time because Dre in 1998, almost like that movie WALL-E.
The animated joint?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they were showing how the humans are living, everybody's just sitting in these chairs and accessing everything digitally. They're saying, Dre was prophet level here because he's talking about all the cosmetic surgeries, all of the digital AI stuff that we're starting to see now. Again, Big Boy is just nowhere on that song. George Clinton is more on the same script as Dre than Big Boy is. But those are the 3 that I can think of. Synthesizer and Art of Storytelling Part 2, blatant concepts. Art of Storytelling Part 2, probably the best executed concept on here. Y'all Scared, loose concept. Agreed.
Yeah, not a ton of it. And so my score will probably be a little bit lower than everything else, but that doesn't necessarily mean, not to knock it, so to speak.
All you need is one good concept song on an album. So, it's not one of those features that you need a ton of, but all good albums do something in that territory where you could say, man, that was different. They did something most rappers don't do.
That's true.
So
that's a good point.
Consider that if you got two and a half of those songs.
That's a good point when you phrase it like that. I would say 4.5 then. That's a good point. You don't need a full album of that. People have tried, you know what I mean? But
cool. That takes us to the content dimensions. I put these together. It's dimension 8, We talk about the externalized content. How much are they talking about things outside of their own internal monologue and autobiographical position, and it's more social issues, government, the hood, relationships. How much are we getting that on here?
Yeah, this definitely some of that sprinkled in here. You kind of talked about this early when you were saying like kind of how believable or whatnot it is, because they do pull from what sounds like personal experiences, but they're so relatable that you don't have to be from East Point, Georgia, to get it. And so I think because of that, that adds to it. I was in Nashville and understood everything that they were trying to get across, because you get the same issues, or the same people that were a little bit older with me were complaining about some of the same things. So it's not super heavy on the issues, from a here's what's wrong with the world type stuff, but it's a little bit sprinkled in there.
Yeah, and you fold relationship talk into that. Most albums have the quintessential or the requisite girl song, right? They don't have that here, but you can tell they're talking. Mamacita might be the closest to talking about relationship stuff. And then, but because they do these loose things, like we said, y'all scared. In that one song, if fear is the dominant theme, they're touching on multiple aspects of fear, right? Which is a social commentary. You talk about a song like Slump, that's all about the dope game. You get 3 different perspectives of the dope game. And I mentioned Big Boy being the most mature voice on there, like, hey, here's the risk of the game. Cool Breeze about giving back and how, what he said before, our gangsta ass partner get us all locked up. He's always talking like somebody's running the risk of ruining the whole caper. That's always Cool Breeze's verses. Backbone is just describing the game. This is the first time he throws his 5-4 tray in there, but that whole thing is blanketed under this theme of we're talking about the dope game.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how they do the songs on here. There's not a lot of songs where like this is about this. They're just, I'm touching on this and in a loose way. Chunky Fire is about rappers stepping it up. Aquemini is about this is how we're sticking together. So is Return of the G. And Synthesizer is supposed to be about the future. So yeah, I mean, you're getting content here. They just are not doing this in an in-your-face way.
Agreed. Yeah, and but that's what's dope about it. That's why it takes a publication 15 years to be like, oh, okay, we got it wrong, because you have time. There are things to unpack, which adds to the replay value and adds to the impact and the legacy of it.
Absolutely.
So I would definitely go 4 with that.
4 for the externalized. That takes us to 9, which is the internalized. How much of their exposition are they giving you? How much do we come out of this album knowing about Big Boy and Dre themselves and feeling closer to them?
That's a good one.
Which you kind of already said.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, they did speak on that pretty frequently. I would say 4 for that as well. And again, it's them kind of, like you said, we don't know if they're joking a little bit but they're serious when they're saying it, and it's super relatable to the common person. So it's like, hey, is that about them, or is that an observation that they're making of how everyone else is feeling? So that's why it's a little up in the air, but I would still say strong. It's still a strong 4.
Yeah, and it's interwoven with aspects of themselves that they've already given you. It's like, oh, it's not far-fetched. And even when Dre is talking about pulling out a gun, he's like, no, Dre came in the gate talking about guns. Like, don't forget, it's just because he's wearing a blonde wig now. So, or when Big Boy gets deep, it's like, nah, they got deep on the first album. So
absolutely, nothing was out of character. Nothing was a blatant reach. It doesn't feel like it, at least, which makes it just, again, that more relatable. You're like, is that a true story, or is it could be? And it fits because of that.
Final dimension 10. Storytelling. Here they actually have 2 songs called The Art of Storytelling, so they kind of put themselves on Front Street,
right?
Right. And then they tell stories all throughout. Spody Odie, series of stories, and so forth. So on a general level throughout this album, do you feel like you get good quality storytelling?
I do. I think so. I think they paint pictures well, man. A lot of these records, a lot of these verses sound like they took time to put together, which I love in an album when it sounds like you took the time. You didn't make this overnight. Not to say it couldn't be done. You've got a couple of albums that were done in a week or done in 3 days or whatever the case may be. But that's what makes, when you do have a classic project and someone goes, yeah, I made that in a week. That's why it's such a big deal. That's why that people highlight that so much, because these things, stuff that sounds like this, sounds like it takes time. Those verses took time to craft. They was in the studio for a week to do this verse. That's what it sounds. Because that's how long it would have took me. You know what I mean? If ever would have been able to do it. So with that being said, I would say from a full body of work, the storytelling is high. I'll give it a 4.5.
Cool. Yeah, I think when you put it like that, from that perspective, that makes total sense. Yeah. When they are not doing straight up linear, hey, this is what happened one day, they are still painting pictures. Even something as subtle as, and something, I forgot to mention is Dre has always created this delineating line of how he is so Atlanta while always recognizing how outside of the Atlanta norm he is. Yeah. I think about his verse on I Can't Wait, where he was like, yeah, I'm from the South where they got ugly pimp cups and but on this where he's like, live from home of the ballers with dirty dollars, beauty parlors, baby ballers, street scholars, majoring in culinary arts. Like, he's always kind of separated himself, but acknowledged this is his landscape. This is where he's from. So they're always painting the picture in every verse. Slump, absolutely. West Savannah. I'm just a player like that. My Jesus slightly creased, and it could be argued that what they do on Spody Odie is better storytelling than the art of storytelling songs. Because
I agree.
I'm in the club with them on both verses. So
right, I'm seeing all of it happen right in front of me. Because we have.
He said she was as fine as a stallion on skates. So yeah, man. You said 4.5 for that?
Most def.
All right, and with that, that concludes our Category 2 review of the classic album, which turned 25 this year. OutKast, Aquemini. Give it to the end of this year. I'm sure y'all will be pitched an approach for taking it to a different platform if y'all so choose. CJ, it's been a pleasure, man. Can you let the people know where they can find you, what y'all got cooking up next?
Absolutely, man. You can find us at Culturalist Theory on YouTube. Just search that. Holler at your boy on Instagram, animal_brown. I appreciate the invite, bro. It's great talking this, one of my favorite albums. We actually did a list on Culturalist Theory of the top 10 albums from this year, 1998. Y'all make sure to go check that out. See where we put Aquemini. It is on there. Please believe that. That's not a spoiler alert. At least it shouldn't be. But y'all check that out. And we have listed countdowns and rankings very similar to that, with artist discographies, with years, categories, the whole nine, man. Hip hop and R&B. We'll be expanding very soon to add different pillars of culture. So be on the lookout for film lists next being added to the thing, man. Yeah, we're trying to expand it, man. So we're just trying to grow.
Y'all are so dope, man. Just keep doing what you do. Until then, F for Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to the meth.